you so much for coming. My name is Jacqueline Pollauf, and I'm really glad that you're here and joining me today for this concert of sonatas for the harp. And as usual, this performance will last about 30 minutes. I'm going to play 3 pieces, talk a bit about the pieces as we go along. And the program is below in the description. The chat also is open if you'd like to say anything. And at the end of the performance, I will stay around to answer a few questions. So one interesting thing about the 3 pieces that I'm going to play today is that all 3 of them were written by composers that are not particularly well known. Certainly none of them are giants within the classical music world. But you could argue quite convincingly that all 3 of these pieces are these composers' most famous works. So it's kind of a nice little theme in addition to the obvious theme of them all being sonatas for the harp. And sonata, I thought we would start by talking a little bit about that because a sonata is kind of a confusing term within the classical music world. And that's because it's really, there's 2 terms. There's a general term and a more specific term. So in the general sense, sonata is frequently used as kind of a generic title for pieces. So there are many sonatas out there written by all kinds of different composers. Similar to the way that there are many symphonies out there. You know, there's Beethoven symphonies and Mozart and Haydn. Lots of pieces with the name symphony, so quite similar with sonata. And a sonata really refers to, specifically in the classical time period, an instrumental piece with 3 movements, and typically those movements are structured in a fast, slow, fast progression. Later sonatas sometimes would add a 4th movement. There have been various variations upon that classic form. But sonata as a specific term can refer to sonata form, and that typically applies to the first movement of a piece, such as the first movement of a sonata, or the first movement of a symphony, or the first movement of a string quartet. And sonata form talks about the structure of that movement. So generally it's divided into 3 sections: the exposition, development, and recapitulation. And there are a lot of kind of particulars to that structure within there. So sometimes I think people just find sonata a confusing term because there's so much to it, these different distinctions and all sorts of different ways it's developed. But today we're looking at it in the broader sense, the sonata as different types of pieces. So the first sonata that I wanted to play is an excellent example of a classical sonata. It has the typical 3 movements, fast, slow, fast, and it was written by Sophia Dussek. Now, Sophia Dussek is interesting. She was a musician who sang, played the harp, played the piano, and composed. And she had kind of a mixture to her background. So she was born in Scotland, but she was of Italian descent, and then she lived much of her life in England. But her first husband was actually a Czech man, and he also was a composer and a pianist, Jan Ladislav Dussek. So the piece that I'm about to play by her is certainly her most famous work, and for many years it was incorrectly attributed to her husband, this composer Jan Ladislav Dussek, but quite happily it has been correctly reattributed to her, Sophia Dussek, as the sole composer of it. So the first movement is quite exciting. I think it's really a volatile movement. You'll hear a lot of changes where one moment it's really driving and pushing forward, and then all of a sudden it kind of pulls back and goes into a more gentle moment. So there's a lot of this back and forth within the first movement. Then the second movement, the slow movement, is really expressive. I feel like it's quite understated. There's a lot of undercurrents to it and things that aren't maybe explicitly said but are still there nonetheless. And both the first and second movements are in the key of C minor, but then rather surprisingly, the final movement moves to the key of C major. So it's quite fast and bubbly and cheerful. And it's written in Rondo form, so you'll keep hearing the theme recurring. You'll hear the theme and then it goes somewhere else and then back to the theme and so forth. So here is the Sonata in C minor by Sophia Dussek. So the next piece that I wanted to play today is much shorter than the first piece that you just heard or the last piece that I'll be playing. This is just a sonata with only one movement, the Sonata in D major by Mateo Albeniz. And as I mentioned at the start, Mateo Albeniz, like the other composers, is not particularly well known. In fact, frequently you have to clarify with him that you're not talking about Isaac Albeniz, another composer with the same last name, but it's just a coincidence, they are not related. So Mateo Albeniz, in addition to being a composer, was a priest, so a lot of the music that he wrote actually was religious. But this piece that I'm about to play, it was originally written for keyboard and then transcribed for the harp by Susanna Mildonian, a well-known harpist. And the piece itself by Albeniz has really a distinctly Spanish sound to it. But Susanna Mildonian, the harpist transcriber, has a background kind of similar to Sophia Dussek's, where she was born in Italy to Armenian parents, but then has spent many years teaching as the harp professor at the Royal Conservatory of Music in Brussels, Belgium. So another kind of interesting background with all of these countries wound up into one. So here is the Sonata in D major by Mateo Albeniz. And for me, this is really a very kind of cheerful, bright and sunny piece, very crisp. It sounds very much like a sunny day to me. All right. Well, believe it or not, I just have one piece left on the program, with two of these sonatas being multi-movement works. They're a bit longer than some things, so just a three-piece program today. And before I wanted to play that, I of course wanted to thank everyone for attending and for listening, and say that I hope you've been enjoying it. Information about how to make a voluntary donation is in the description, either through PayPal or Venmo. And of course, donations of any amount are very much appreciated. Tomorrow I'm going to be hosting an online student event about Marcel Grangeni's music as repertoire for learning. And Grangeni actually was my teacher's teacher, so I feel quite well connected to him and to his music, so I'm really looking forward to that. And then next month for November, I'll be giving a performance of the music of harpist Marcel Tournier, and then a student workshop about combining the right and left hands and hand independence, all kinds of things about the coordination of playing the harp. So I hope you'll be able to join me for those. So this last piece that I'm going to play, the Sonata in C minor by Giovanni Pescetti, is a piece that I've always wanted to learn, and I finally did so this month. I'm quite excited about that. And Pescetti was an Italian composer and organist who lived in England for a while. He wrote this piece for a harpsichord, and then Carlos Salzedo transcribed it for the harp. And it's in three movements, just like the first sonata, a fast, slow, fast structure. And one thing I find really interesting about it is that although sonatas and sonata form both are really associated with things being divided into threes, there's a lot of duality to this sonata. So the first movement is very clearly divided into two halves, and there's some sort of supporting ideas of this duple idea. So the hands are used really kind of in an interesting way, where one hand will play something and the other hand will imitate it right after. So they're going back and forth a lot. And it keeps moving the first movement between the key of C minor and E flat major. Actually, that theme keeps up in all three movements. And then all three movements also are in time signatures that are duple time. So I love this idea of layering all these twos on top of the three structure of a sonata. So the first movement is a very strong and forceful movement, quite exciting. And then the second movement is the slow one. It has a lot of ornamentation, extra grace notes and things in the melody. Give it kind of a lacy sound, I would say. And in that one, the phrases are really long. The harmonies just keep going and going, which makes it feel kind of unsettled. You keep waiting for it to resolve, but the resolution is always just receding out of sight. And then the last movement is very quick and energetic, and it's quite similar to the first movement. It has a similar theme and everything, so another kind of nice tie-in with these bookends. So here to end the performance is the Sonata in C minor by Giovanni Battista Pescetti, transcribed by Marcel Grangeni. I'm sorry, not Marcel Grangeni, by Carlos Salzedo. right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. So nice to see everyone here. I'm just going to go ahead and look through the comments. Oh, it looks like Garrett has a question. So Garrett's question is about Grandini's transcriptions of Bach. And actually that is something I'm going to cover in tomorrow's workshop. That's definitely on the list. So yes, Grandini made a lovely transcription of Bach's Violin Sonata No. 2. But it comes from a whole set of transcriptions of Bach that Grandini did. So he actually wrote what he calls etudes, and they're a set of 12 etudes, all taking themes from different works that Bach wrote for solo violin, violin sonatas, and partitas. And then Grandini made these pretty elaborate transcriptions, because obviously solo violin to harp is a big change. So he really added quite a bit to them, and they're intended not only to be beautiful pieces, but also to work on some specific technical aspects of playing the harp. So those are a great set of pieces. Yes, thank you everyone for all the nice comments. That's really great to see. Does anyone have any other questions that I could answer? I would be happy to do so. I'm trying to think if sometimes people send me questions in advance that they want to ask about. I'm trying to remember. Now my mind is going a little bit blank. What questions did I have earlier in the week? I'm not coming up with anything. Well, one interesting thing about today's program is that the first piece was, of course, originally written for the harp by Sophia Dussek, and she herself played the harp. So it works quite nicely on the instrument, as you can imagine. But the other two pieces were both transcriptions, but despite them being transcriptions, they feel more comfortable and more kind of idiomatic than some other pieces. So that's quite nice. I mean, I think part of that is probably due to the great work of both transcribers, Susanna, Mildonian, and Carlos Salzedo. But yeah, I think something also maybe about the originals just sort of lended itself to harp. I mean, sometimes for myself, I hear a piece and I think, oh, that would be an excellent transcription. I can hear it already, even if it's never been played on the harp before. All right, so we have a question about learning new pieces from Judy. So Judy, usually it takes me about a month to learn a new piece. And for this fall, for the performances like this that I'm doing, I programmed quite a few new pieces, which I'm very excited about. Some of them, like the Sonata in C minor by Pescetti that I just played, have been on my list for a while, so it's great to be able to get around to them and finally learn them. And others are pieces that I just came across recently, and I thought were really beautiful and would like to learn. So it's always fun to have something, you know, brand new to tackle, although sometimes a little daunting at the same time. Oh, thank you so much, Judy. What a lovely compliment. And then we have another question about injury. So injury is a big topic for musicians of any kind because it's very physically demanding to play an instrument, of course. And there's also so much repetitive motion. No matter what instrument you're playing, you're just using the same muscles day after day. And of course, you want to practice a lot to build your skills and everything. But doing that can take some wear and tear on your body. So for myself, I've never had a major injury or anything that has forced me to take a break from playing, which I'm really grateful for. I do, though, quite a few preventative things to try to keep myself in good shape. So I do some yoga every day. And I exercise regularly, and sometimes I will do things like see a massage therapist to assist with, keeping everything kind of in good shape. And then also when I'm practicing, I don't usually practice for really long stretches of time. So frequently I'll work on a piece maybe for 20 minutes or half an hour and then get up and walk around a little bit and then come back. But I don't usually practice for longer than 2 hours in one stretch. I mean, including those little breaks in there, but if I wanted to have a day where, say, I practiced 3 or 4 hours, I would split that up into different segments, just to kind of keep things loose and keep things moving. All right. Any other questions from anybody? Well, so next month, maybe I'll tell you a little bit more about next month's performance. So next month is going to be the music of Marcel Tournier, and there are several new pieces on that program, so I've been working on those already. So I'm really looking forward to that. I'm going to be playing 4 different pieces by Tournier, and he was a French harpist and composer who taught for many years at the Paris Conservatory, and he composed a lot of music for the harp, really composed quite extensively. And his music is very much in a French impressionist style with kind of these beautiful cascades of notes. And I think he was always really thinking about how you would play it on the harp. So he uses some very interesting harp-specific techniques and approaches to sometimes give these pieces these just sort of almost explosions of notes throughout them. They can be quite beautiful. But one piece I'm really looking forward to on that, which is one I just discovered recently, is his Versus Russ, his Russian lullaby. And it's just a short, sweet little piece, but it's so beautiful. I love the harmonies that he uses. Yes, so looking forward to that very much. All right. Well, it doesn't look like there's any more questions, but as I've mentioned in the past, sometimes one comes through just as I'm clicking off. So if that happens, I'll answer your question in the comments of the video later. And so I apologize in advance if I cut everyone off. But thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it and hope to see you all next month.